So this session is hopefully going to be quite a fascinating one, where we're going to bring together a private company pushing solar rooftop in India and EESL. If, Both of them are outside right now, so I hope that they join us soon. But right before that, we'll be presenting some work that we've been doing at the Center for Policy Research, looking at how the smart cities mission in India has been actually pushing forward low carbon projects. So a lot of the questions that Eric and Remy, brought up in their fascinating studies, in the sense of urban governments leading energy transitions, and the kind of creation of new institutions. It's fine. Okay, so you can get the thing rolling. Yeah, you can sit here. Yeah. Urban governments leading energy transitions. These are questions that are coming up in India's smart cities mission, and we want to highlight that perspective a bit. If you can give me your slides as well. Okay. Just a quick introduction. I'll be joined with, I'm a researcher at the Center for Policy Research. I'm part of this thing called the Initiative on Climate, Energy, and Environment. I specifically look at how Indian cities are responding to climate change and leading low-carbon energy transitions in India. I'm joined with Mr. Gaurang Sethi, who is the head of business development at Azure Power, which is one of India's leading solar power producer. And also, we're very happy to have Mr. Santosh Kumar Thakur, who's the general manager of the street lighting division of the Indian ESCO, which is the Energy Efficiency Services Limited, the company, the public undertaking that's been solely responsible for the cheapening of LEDs in India. So we're very excited to have these two very emerging, exciting, you can just move in for the, emerging, exciting organizations that are leading, the uptake of low carbon energy, both on the demand side and supply side in India. So briefly on the Smart Cities mission, this is a flagship urbanization project by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. It used to be the Ministry of Urban Development. And the goal here was to basically, at least the rhetoric, was to basically enable cities and organizations at the city level to kind of, take on new technologies. The word smart was chosen, through research we actually found that even though, the smart cities actually designates a lot of digital technologies, a lot of the focus has actually also been on basic urban development. So this is actually a classic urban development scheme. But what's fascinating about this was that there were quite a few elements to do with energy. And energy is not necessarily a subject that cities themselves in India take up. It's a subject that normally state governments handle through their electricity utilities. It's a subject that the ministry and the central ministries handle through the Ministry of Power, the Ministry of Coal, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. And these sectoral verticals normally don't talk to each other. But the Smart City mission suddenly became an occasion where you had green buildings, electric vehicles, solar power, energy distribution networks, all being coupled together in a project in India, in 100 Indian cities. As you can see here, there were about 4 explicit energy-related measures. So you had waste to energy, you had smart meters and management, you had renewable sources of energy, and energy-efficient green buildings. So really the whole gamut of energy schemes that you can get were actually being pushed forward in the Smart Cities mission. And if you read the papers on India's Smart City mission, you actually don't hear about this much. It's mostly about very critical estimates around the quality of the mission, the fact that there's actually lack of implementation on the ground, and these are things that we want to get into in the future. But actually, conceptually, the Smart City mission is actually tackling some very interesting projects, trying to lead to new kinds of energy, and cities themselves leading that transition. So this work was based on a database by the Center for Policy Research that we developed. We scraped through the proposals of cities. So cities proposed to the central government what they wanted to do. We scraped through that of the top 60 cities. This was work done by colleagues at the urban team led by Persis Tarapurwala. And then we categorized the energy projects within that into 5 sectors. So these broadly follow the smart solutions in the smart city mission. So there's energy power network projects, energy production projects, so kind of supply, lighting and equipment, so mostly energy efficiency, lighting and equipment, e-mobility, so electric vehicles, and green buildings, so these kind of insulated or kind of green building infrastructure. Within that, we found 4 clusters of low carbon energy. So you had this entire body of projects around solar projects. So you had solar lighting, you had solar rooftop solar, which we'll get into in a bit. You had projects around lighting, your projects on e-mobility, and your project on waste to energy. So these are also 4 low carbon clusters that have been being pushed by the central government. With solar rooftop, the central government under its Sustainable Rooftop Implementation for Solar Transformation of India scheme, SRISTI, is actually aiming to put 40 gigawatts of solar in the next few years in India. With lighting, obviously we know of the work of EESL and their street lighting division. Of e-mobility, there's been a big push by Niti Aayog around getting EVs on the ground. With Waste to Energy, there's been a push around getting waste to energy as part of the Swachh Bharat mission. So these are different schemes coming together, really talking about new ways to deal with energy in Indian cities. Briefly, to go through the different categories, on the left we have the number of projects proposed across the 60 cities, with the black dots being the percentage of cities pursuing these projects. So that's the axis on the bottom. As you can see, most cities, around 98 to 100%, are pursuing projects around energy power networks, energy distribution, pursuing projects in energy supply, and a lot are actually also pursuing projects around energy efficiency. Less so on e-mobility and green buildings, though they're actually quite more significant than you would actually think. You wouldn't think that about more than 40 cities in India are actually pursuing active projects on e-mobility. On the finance side, most of the money is going towards the energy powered network. So this kind of goes into the discourse around smart cities mission actually being a scheme that targets basic infrastructure. But as you can also see, there's a significant amount of things happening in the demand side as well, though it's mostly on supply side investment. And so the story around investing about 1,100, maybe 1,300 crore in energy through cities is an undercurrent of the smart city mission and hasn't really been touched upon. So what we want to gesture with this is that cities themselves are emerging as very interesting institutions governing energy in India today. That wasn't the case a couple of years ago. To go into our clusters, this is the average budget per city. So cities are on average dedicating about 90 crores into solar, different kinds of solar projects, are dedicating about 50 crores on average, even though there are less cities pursuing waste to energy on waste to energy projects. Lighting is quite efficient that way. So most cities are only dedicating about 40 crore, but you're getting quite a lot of bang for your buck, and most cities are doing that. E-mobility, not a lot of things are happening. So an average e-bus costs 2 crores. So most cities on average are only buying 15 e-buses by this metric, right? And only about 65%, 70% of cities are pursuing e-mobility. Now that we want to dive into the clusters a bit more, these are the top 10 cities for each of the clusters by amount of finance dedicated. So this is 0 to 600 crores. As you can see, with solar is dominating most of the investment here. The top 10 the 10th city in solar is more or less around the top 2 cities in the other clusters. New Delhi here dominates most of the solar investment. They're dedicating about 15 megawatts in their smart city mission. And what's interesting actually is that apart from New Delhi, only about 10 of the cities are actually in more than 2 of the clusters, right? So this wasn't some kind of larger vision of the cities dedicating themselves to low carbon energy and then targeting each of these clusters separately, but actually that cities were picking on particular projects in each of these clusters and pursuing them, and dedicating not an insignificant amount of money towards these things. And just to set up the next 2 presentations quickly, with solar and lighting, which are actually 2 of the clusters with the most investment, within them, most of the lighting is being dedicated to street lighting. Especially in the top 10 cities, there's a bit of work, a bit of money going into LED fittings into buildings, but most of the investment in the Smart Cities mission is going towards LED street lighting. With the solar mission, with the solar sector cluster, most of it going to rooftop solar, apart from New Delhi that's doing this kind of other grounded solar project. So these are the 2 emerging clusters that we see in the Smart City mission, and we're really glad to have both Azure Power and ESL that can talk us through these dynamics a bit more of what is it like to work with cities, what is it like to kind of deal with the governance situations within them, and what is the potential and challenges of doing so. And if I can invite Gaurang to take on the next presentation. So I'll be giving you about 15 minutes. We try to be as strict as possible because we want to open it up to discussion after that. Thanks. And yeah, just one more thing. This work could not have been done were it not for the extremely impressive efforts of our intern, Federico De Lorenzo. I mean, he's just been plugged at this for the last 3 months. So just a round of applause for Federico. He's been very impressive. Thank you. Yes, that would be really helpful. You can just plug it in and I'll just open it.
So as I think we have a fairly well-informed and knowledgeable audience over here, but I'm going to try my best to shed a little light on some of the potential and challenges that the solar. Is it better now? Yeah. On some of the potential and the challenges that the solar rooftop sector presents, and I think it's been a great introduction that Ankit has given. So I'm going to, before I go into the details of the presentation, I'm just going to do a quick first energy company in India to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And with that, I think I'm going to dive into some of the rooftop projects. So this is a really cool image on a big, large, one of the largest single roof projects that we have in the country. It's 2 megawatts on a single roof. It's at in Punjab for the Punjab Mandi Board, which is basically the vegetable and fruit market, which have large warehouses and they have less energy consumption, but huge roof areas. So this particular project, is actually a 2 megawatt project and selling electricity directly to the Discom of Punjab. And just a quick heads up on the overall, just a quick update on the rooftop portfolio that we have. So out of the 3 gigawatt portfolio that Azure Power has, about 200 megawatts is in rooftop, with about 50 megawatts operational there, and the remaining 150, 160 megawatts is still under construction. Now, so before we go into the challenges, I think, which is what my primary focus is going to be on in the presentation, the challenges that we have faced or we continue to face in executing rooftop projects. So where have we reached so far? So I think the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy set a very ambitious rooftop target of achieving 40 gigawatts of rooftop solar projects by the end of financial year 21-22. And so far, I think we are, depending on what numbers we look at, I think the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy and the Central Electricity Authority say that we are at about 1.2 gigawatts of rooftop projects commissioned right now. So we still have a fairly long way to go, as is suggested by this particular curve over here. But I think, nevertheless, there has been considerable and good amount of progress, and I think there are 4 major reasons why we have reached where we have so far, and that is because of the supportive regulation and policy framework. Had it not been for the net metering policies or the incentives and initiatives that MNRE had taken, right from rooftop subsidies to CFAs and other such incentives which were provided to rooftop projects, this would not have been possible. So one is that, the regulatory structure and incentive framework. The second is, obviously it goes without saying, the overall rooftop, demand which continues to grow. So India is still, the energy, there are still a lot of states which have peak energy deficit, and more than that, the consumer tariffs for the commercial as well as the residential and the industrial segment continue to rise. And of late, over the last 5-6 years, we have seen tremendous amount of reduction in the tariffs of solar power. So we are selling solar, as you can see in the last bar graph over there, is much cheaper than the overall grid, prices these days, and diesel and coal for that matter as well. So, and as you would have heard in the news, large-scale utility solar projects are now selling electricity at 2.5 rupees per kilowatt hour, as compared to the overall commercial and industrial rates, in which we buy electricity at 4 or 5 times that at least. So now coming to the market potential, so I think overall this is another MNRE estimate. I'm picking these numbers off from the MNRE report, and which I think was prepared in collaboration with a couple of the other research bodies like TERI and Shakti Foundation, I think. So we have 124 gigawatts of rooftop solar potential in India, and I think out of that, I think the smart cities that Ankit was referring to in your presentation, there is about 12 gigawatts of solar potential in just the smart cities alone. So that is a huge amount of potential. Now, where is this consumption really going? I think if from the solar perspective, we need to also understand who are our consumers and where is this electricity, where is the demand coming from. So broadly, we can divide it into 4 major heads, with into industrial, commercial, residential, and government. Now, government has been the area which has been the prime area of focus for most of the solar power developers, where a lot of the growth has come from. And government have further subdivided into government buildings, and then a big part of the government electricity requirement is coming from the railways and different metro, so Delhi Metro, Bangalore Metro, Hyderabad Metro, etc. are all either completely government owned or partly government owned with joint venture partnerships with certain private entities. So this is where a lot of the load and the energy requirement is coming from. Now, how can solar help meet this demand? So the one which captures most of the news these days and the most of the headlines is the large utility scale projects, which basically sell power through long-term PPAs to, directly to the discoms, or through intermediary bodies like the Solar Energy Corporation of India or to NTPC, who then eventually sell it to discoms. Then these discoms obviously distribute this power, which is their primary function, to these major consumers, be it government, be it industrial, commercial, or residential. So, but other than that, how do we, trying to integrate it or trying to, connect it with the smart city or the solar city mission that we've been talking about, a big part of this potential can directly be met by having direct energy agreements with the building owners, be it commercial or the industrial, by setting up solar rooftop projects or by setting up even ground mount projects either within areas or land that they have available within their premises. And even for that matter, the Electricity Act of India has this provision of open access in which we can set up solar projects further away in areas which are feasible for solar installation, solar installation in terms of having good radiation, connectivity, and barren land available. So, which is where most of the growth has happened in solar in India. So, I think that is the other avenue through which cities can, or through which solar can be provided to some of these consumers and interested off-takers. So, going forward, how do these, from a commercial standpoint, before I dive into the challenges, how do these business models work? So I think broadly we can divide these into three main business models. The first one is the public-private partnership. So this is kind of how it all started in the rooftop space. So the government of Gujarat came out with this, bid and tender opportunity in which they said that the solar power developer which wins the bid and the contract will sell power directly to the discom there, which was GUVNL, and the discom will pay the developer for the electricity or the solar power that they purchase. And the way that we will keep the rooftop owner incentivized and interested in this entire mechanism is that the developer will pay some kind of an incentive in the form of a roof rental or a lease mechanism or a green energy incentive, whatever we may call it, to make sure that the rooftop owner gives access to his roof and continues to do that for the period of 25 years, which is what the PPA is for. And, also ensure the safekeeping and, overall safety of the project, because at the end of the day, the developer is going to be going there only for the operation and maintenance, which can happen, but the roof owner needs to be in sync and make sure he has the right incentives in place. So this was a great model, and I think going forward, we would really hope that the policy is such that some of the other states kind of emulate that. So this kind of happened in Punjab as well. The first slide, the first picture that I showed was also selling power directly to the discom of Punjab from that particular rooftop project. The second is the most common one and the most talked about as well, in which the solar developer sets up the solar project directly on the roof, interconnects it with the LT panel or the electricity panel in the building, and directly has a PPA with the building owner. It could be a hotel, it could be a real estate company, it could be a hospital, etc., whatever, or a school building or a government building for that matter. Then the other mechanism is the intermediary power sale, in which too the solar power developer is selling electricity directly to the roof owners, but then we have government intermediaries or facilitators like Solar Energy Corporation of India, or like it could be different nodal agencies of various states, be it the MP nodal agency, be it the Odisha nodal agency, in which they facilitate this entire process. And and through that process, basically they put us in touch with the roof owners and help us sign the PPAs, because otherwise roof aggregation can be a big challenge. And then they also make sure that the roof owners are on the same page. Okay, so I think I'm a little short on time, as I just realized. Am I 5 minutes or 5 minutes away? All right, then I'm on track. Okay. So solar rooftop challenges. So I think I've broadly divided the challenges that we encounter in executing these projects into policy, regulatory, and technical. So this is going to be slightly wordy, so I'm going to have to make sure that you hang in there with me. So the policy challenges that we face, I think the bigger ones are on the net metering policies, which are vital, or net metering or gross metering policies, which are vital for these solar projects to be executed. So these different policies or regulations that the state bodies come out with sometimes put an artificial cap on the rooftop projects in terms of the capacities that can be installed on an individual roof. So even if, for example, the roof has sufficient area to set up, say, 2 or 3 megawatts projects, they will have a cap saying that uh, the solar rooftop project cannot be greater than X percentage of the contract demand of the particular building, or it cannot be greater than the distribution transformer in the area, or it cannot be greater than or basically the energy that is being supplied from the solar project cannot exceed the energy that is being exported or consumed by the building owner. Because I think the idea is that they do not want the building owners to become generators. They want the building owners to stay consumers at the end of the day. And I think so that is the overall policy idea. And basically, and this is so. I think this particular this particular slide that I showed, the challenges kind of are divided into each of these business models. So this one particular challenge is a big challenge for the business model in which we are trying to sign a direct contract with the building owner. So, and had it been for a gross metering case in which we can sell the power to the discom directly, then this challenge goes away. But so the other challenge is on the discom front is that very few of these tendering authorities or the distribution companies in India are coming out with tenders for buying the solar power directly from rooftop projects, like what happened in Gujarat, like what happened in Punjab, and maybe in a couple of other states. The tenders and project opportunities in these direct PPAs with the distribution companies have really come down. The other thing is that even if we feel that these are all challenges that we can surpass, it is very hard to get direct records of information from the government authorities of the buildings that they want us to set up these projects on the connected load of all of these buildings, because at the end of the day, setting up large rooftop projects spread over hundreds of buildings, is going to be a challenge. So I think then there are project execution milestones. I think I'm going to skip through that. Then there are the other challenge, I think, as Ankit had kind of pointed out in his presentation, is lack of coordination sometimes between central and state government authorities, in which the central government authorities will say that you will get access to state government buildings to set up your projects, but then there's going to be a confusion between the state and central bodies, and then it's going to make it harder for us to be able to sign the PPAs and execute the projects on their roofs. I think I've kind of already talked about gross metering and net metering challenges. I think those are other. I think I can further take those up during the Q&A session in case somebody wants to know more about how the policy on net metering or gross metering works, because these are essentially the keys for executing rooftop projects. Similarly, there's another approval which is required by the Chief Electrical Inspector, which is CEIG, and these are all these approvals which can vary from one state to another and basically complicate the overall process of just taking these approvals and executing them. So a company like us, which has experience in a certain state or in more number of states, it is kind of simpler, but still there is a teething phase to that. So I think then speaking on open access, there are going to be, while the Electricity Act does allow open access, and the fact that we can set up solar projects in one particular corner of the state and sell it to another corner in the same state, or for that matter any other corner in the country, there are going to be a lot of regulatory challenges in terms of the charges in terms of wheeling, banking, transmission charges that these discoms and regulatory authorities impose, making some of these projects sometimes slightly unviable. And what happens sometimes is in states like Karnataka, in which they have retrospectively removed the exemptions on these transmission and open access charges on past setup solar projects, which basically adds a level of complexity to these. Execution challenges, I think, is more in terms of roof aggregation, as I mentioned. Then the different processes that the government imposes, I think, for us to be able to execute these projects. So typically we would, if there is a government project and opportunity, we would want the government to already have some kind of a buy-in from the different building owners or the government buildings that they want us to set up the solar projects on. And if that hasn't happened in the past, I think even after winning the contract, it makes our, executing a big challenge. So I think one case in point was, I think, an MP rooftop tender, Madhya Pradesh one, which was in the news recently. I think we won about 11 megawatts in that as well. I think one of the great jobs that the government or the nodal agency there had done was making sure that the different government buildings, or for that matter, even the private buildings, that they wanted to set up the solar projects on, they had done their due diligence, they had convinced them on the benefits of setting up a solar project, and that has made execution slightly simpler. Then we need unshaded area, and for us to be able to set up these projects. Connectivity and injection needs to be looked at when the government bodies are assessing the feasibility of these routes. And then the other thing is with private. So these, I think the overall focus has primarily been on the government off-takers, because I think government is a great starting point to initiate this entire solar rooftop revolution, because I think once a government body in a particular city has done it, then it makes it simpler for some of the private entities to be able to emulate that, I think. And hence I think, one of the other challenges that we face on the private side is on the bankability of PPAs and the private off-takers. So that's one of the challenges. And so I think, just to kind of summarize, I think we feel that the 40 gigawatt target is an ambitious target, but we do think it's achievable. But for us to be able to make sure that we stay on the right trajectory and hit that, regulatory and policy support, which can, I think, be provided by bodies like CPR and ISA for that matter, in terms of influencing some of these government bodies, be it at the center or the state level, is going to be vital. So I think I'll end with that, and then maybe we can take some questions. Thank you.
We'll just quickly have Mr. Santosh present, and then we can take questions together. Thank you so much, Gaurang. That was really, really enlightening. This one? Yes. Okay. So again, 15 minutes, and I'll signal you 5 minutes. Okay. And if I have 12 left, I think that was
So, good morning, everybody. I think the tea was slightly. It was possible for you to keep attention here, and what I would like to go through is basically what we are doing exactly on the ground. So this is what we are doing, that is street lighting national program. That is, this is a national program in India which we are doing in most of the cities in India, and through which we are trying to make the Indian cities more energy efficient, and that is also leading to transformation of these cities in terms of quality of living and the quality of lighting on their public places. So just a small wrap through our what EESL exactly is doing is EESL is a joint venture of 4 public sector companies, that is NTPC, REC, PFC and Power Grid Corporation. So it was established about 9 years back, and is now the major thing here is basically the business models, the innovative business models which we are bringing out from time to time, just to obviate the problems which exactly the implementation sector is facing in the public domain. So, like, first of all, initially the major problem for energy efficiency, going for energy efficiency or energy efficient appliances, is the funding. So most of the places and most of the urban local bodies are having funds, but they are not having sufficient funds to transform the entire lighting system or entire anything, for example sewage or drinking water or anything. So they, even if they want to do it, they have to do it in a piecemeal basis. So it will not transform the entire sector as such. So here we have developed a business model in which the complete upfront investment is being done by EESL. So suppose any urban local bodies, we call it ULBs, any ULB which want to go for change in its street lighting system, they sign an agreement with EESL, and EESL simply does the entire upfront investment, changes the lighting system from the conventional lighting to the LED lighting, and there is an approximate saving of more than 50% in the electricity bill for these lighting. And from the savings which is accruing to the ULB, they will be paying to EESL for in a period of say 7 years. And now we also go on maintaining those systems for 7 years. So what we call is as pay as you save system, and this is a now the second thing is basically the only major, the second roadblock in case of going for an energy efficient system is the price of the device. Now LED lights were quite prohibitively priced very high. Not very long back, I think 4 to 5 years back also, it was not possible to even think of going for LED lighting in a major way. So some people were going for energy efficient LED lighting, but it was only in a piecemeal basis or just to show that we are going for energy efficient lighting. So this is the second thing which we thought about is if we go for bulk procurement, then in that case we can bring down the prices of the light, and it will be a very virtuous cycle, what we call it. Basically, we bring down the price of the energy efficient equipment and the demand grows further. And as the demand grows, we get more, we get the opportunity to procure more items in a bulk. So prices go further down. So it is a virtuous cycle, and due to this cycle, basically the prices come down to such a level which is unimaginable even 1 or 2 years back. And the best part is basically is we are passing the entire benefit of price reduction to the consumer. So we are not keeping the benefit of price reduction, we are passing it to the consumer, and that is how we are getting more and more demand from the consumers. Now these are two of our business models basically which are generally used. One is if the client wants to go for upfront investment, they come with us and we guide them on all the parameters like how to go about with the project. Then we aggregate the demand from various utilities and we go for procurement. We help them in procurement, bring down the prices, and then the entire project monitoring is done by us and the whole system, lighting system is changed in case of street lighting. The second method which we call as pay as you save method or ESCO model, in that the complete upfront investment is done by EESL. There is not a single penny which is spent by the customer, and we do the entire retrofitting of the system, and after once the thing they start getting the benefit of the savings, they start the payment to EESL. Now, as you have seen that these are the areas in which EESL is working, and I think most of the areas have been part of the smart city slide earlier shown by Mr. Ankit. And in this, the first one is Ujala, that is, it is basically the domestic bulbs, the LED light bulbs which was started by EESL. The second is the street lighting national program. Then we have building energy efficiency program. This is the municipal energy efficiency program in which we change the inefficient pumps for water supply or sewage treatment with efficient pumps. Then we have AGDSM. This is agricultural demand side management. Then NMRP. This is National Motor Replacement Program. Then we have solar. Then we have e-mobility also. Means we are pioneering in bringing the electric vehicles in India in a big way. Then this one is a very it is a very good program of EESL, and it is catching up very fast all over the country, and that is Smart Meter National Program. Here also we have aggregated the demand, and bring down the prices of a smart meter to such a low level that it has become very affordable by the utilities, and they are not spending any money from their pocket and getting these all their meters changed with the smart meter. Then we have some government programs also like Ajay and Soul. Now, about the Street Light National Program, we are targeting the number of street lights, that is 1.34 crores installed all over the country. So, the expected annual energy saving will be 9 billion. Every year, so we will be saving about 9 billion units every year. And the reduction in peak power demand will be 1500 megawatt. So we can see that by some small changes, that by changing a small street light, we are saving the installation of 1500 megawatt power plant. So we are obviating this demand for this power plant. And the major thing is basically the pace at which we are working. So every week we are changing about 60 to 70,000 street lights every week. So per day we are changing about approximately 10,000 or more than 10,000, and in some weeks we are changing even about 1 lakh lights. So that is the pace at which we are working, and by March we are expecting that we will be able to change all the 1.34 crores street lights in the country. This is our real-time dashboard. Anybody can go to this dashboard and see. Right now you can see that about 7 million street lights already we have changed all over the country. These are this is the further drill down of the dashboard, and basically it shows the state wise, like in each state how many street lights we have changed. This is exactly how we work. There are 4 stages of the project. Initially we have to make the baseline, like what is the present consumption of the system, street light system. Then we prepare a detailed report, like what are the lights will be changed and with which wattage of light, like what was the earlier wattage and what is the new wattage which is required, based on many other compliances of road lighting system and what is the lumen level which is required at road level. Then we go for the project execution. We also provide the centralized control and monitoring system. We call it CCMS. This is basically a group control for the street lights, and it is online, real time. It sends the data real time to the dashboard. And finally we have the performance monitoring and verification phase, where we see that whatever we have replaced, whether it is performing as per the initial plan. So this is one of the major thing which we introduce, and that is basically the control system for the group control system of street light. And basically now, because the smart meter price we have brought down, now we are changing this CCMS with smart meter itself. So now we are utilizing the smart meter for group control of a street light. So one smart meter will make the street lights off and on, and it will basically communicate with the dashboard also regarding the status of all the street lights connected to it. These are some of the challenges which we faced, or some of them we are still facing while carrying out our Street Light National Program. And one of those is obviously the infrastructure issue, which is a major constraint, because the infrastructure is, I should say, poor to very poor in most of the parts of the country. Then we have a major issue related to the payment mechanism also, because most of the urban local bodies are not very flush with funds. They have always scarcity of fund, and they have to decide on the priority whom to pay with whatever funds they have. So this is one of the major areas, but with some of other arrangement with the governments, we are trying to come out of this problem. So when we started with the changing of the conventional street lights with LED street lights, we started with complete turnkey project model, and that we call SITC model with for both LED lights and CCMS. That is basically supply, installation, testing and commissioning, SITC, for both LED light and CCMS. That is, we offloaded the complete project to a particular party, and it was their responsibility to do this complete project on turnkey basis. However, with our experience, we found that both are different things, and different companies specialize in two different things, that is LED lights and CCMS. So then we split the whole packages into two parts, and then we came out with two packages, that is SITC for street lights and SITC for CCMS. So this is the second improvement which we did. But after that, there was some not so good experience with this model also, and we improved upon this, and now we are having we go for supply of lights separately, we hire the installation and maintenance agencies separately for both CCMS and street lights. So now this is working in a very fast way, because for us the pace of work is more important, most important basically. This is our experience basically, and some of the photographs of what we have done. Like this is the AP estate in which the dashboard, like the street light dashboard, is being dedicated to the public by Honorable Chief Minister of that state. This is one of the initial work which we did in Vizag. After that, Hudhud cyclone was there, which had destroyed the complete infrastructure in that city, and we have to start. We did this work from starting from the scratch, and you can see the difference of lighting in this city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Round of applause for both Aurang and Santosh for fascinating questions. Okay, if you don't mind, I'll just squeeze here. Okay, so we've opened some very fascinating questions around national agencies leading to very granular changes in the bulbs of individual cities, and also how solar companies have to deal with both real estate and electricity utility challenges, and kind of the tension between that. I'll open it up to questions. We have about 30 minutes, so it's going to be quite a good amount of time. Yep. So we'll just take 2 or 3 at the same time, like we did last time.
Okay. So my first question is for Azure. I noticed that most of your rooftop sort of models involve interacting with the DISCOM directly. So it's not like utility scale, which has SECI, which sort of takes some of the offtake risk. So, and I also noticed both the examples you gave, Gandhinagar and Punjab back in the heyday, were both credit A. So they were very credit-worthy DISCOMs. Does this affect the kind of cities you bid for? Do you tend to focus on those cities which have bankable DISCOMs? And the next part of that is, again, a lot of what I noticed were variations of the RESCO model, and that leaves the residential sector untapped. Do you have a sort of, do you think there's an alternate mechanism where you can assess how bankable a residential or individual off-taker is in the long run if you're signing 25-year PPAs? And I promise this is my final question. This is for Ankit. I noticed the Delhi investment for solar was really high, but I also noticed very unusually a lot of it was for non-rooftop. I'm curious as to what that could possibly be for. Is it for subsidies for procuring large-scale solar, or is it something else? I just want to see if you could throw some light on that. Thank you.
Also just say what RESCO is, just for the audience.
So RESCO is a renewable energy service company. I think solar rooftop companies, largely, I don't think they lease the land. They use the roof to build, operate, and it's a turnkey service where they either sign the PPA with the roof owners,
Or
with the DISCOM. So there is no cost or capital expense by the roof owner or the person who's procuring the power from the rooftop.
Right.
So we'll just take a couple, if that's okay. I know it's three, so let's just do one more maybe, and then we can take fine, Olivia.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it's very fascinating to see municipality emerge as the main actors actually in this smart city mission. And it reminds me what happened actually with governance of diseases. Municipalities are rising really as the main actors as well. But are we sure that this is the right scales? What I mean to say is that, for example, when you produce electricity as in Delhi, who is responsible? Cities doesn't mean really anything actually in this sense, because it's more municipalities. And how do you connect municipalities, for example, to connect production sites with other municipality, for example, composing entity? In Delhi, as you know, we have many municipalities. How can you connect, for example, the electricity being produced by South Delhi Municipal Council to Gurgaon, to even North Delhi Municipal Council? I say that actually because, yeah, for diseases, the more the disease become international, the more the governance is fragmented, depending on the inclusion of municipalities into a network. So, do we have, for example, a network of cities or municipalities actually are coordinating these efforts, or are we still remaining in this very one actors and no coordination between actors?
I have one question for both speakers, but in a way it's the same question. The first one is, even though you've acknowledged, and that's what Ankit also said, the potential for cities, actually you never talked about any city actor. I'm an urban studies researcher, so when I think of cities, I'm thinking of municipal commissioner, mayor, maybe residential association. Actually, you don't talk about them. So do you interact with them? How do you interact with them? Are they a hurdle, or are they actually, some actors that actually emerge? And similarly, for the model you were describing, my simple question is, we all know the very weak municipalities. You mentioned the finance, but one of the very important aspects of weakness is human resources. So after 7 years, when you leave, what happens? And what is the impact? Have you seen what happens since 2009? Means you've had maybe experiences where, the projects have been handed over to the municipality. So the overarching question is that Ankit, I think, pushed the envelope a little bit by saying that the cities is emerging. That's what we are seeing in the work on smart cities. But actually, I'm not seeing it at all in your presentation. I didn't hear about the cities, so I want to know whether you see them as emerging actors or not. And if they do, how and with whom do you discuss at the city level?
Yeah, so first question is regarding our interaction with the municipal bodies, and obviously we do interact with the municipal bodies only, and what the term which I used was urban local bodies. So we call them urban local bodies. They include all the municipal corporation or municipalities, or we have Nagar Panchayats also at a very small level. So we deal with all three of them. In case of big cities, we have municipal corporations, and we deal with the municipal commissioner. In fact, we sign our agreement for the project with the municipal commissioners only. So regularly we are in touch with the commissioner and the mayor, as well as the chief engineer of that municipal corporation for everything. And then we are included in most of their meetings where they are planning about the smart city mission. Like recently we attended a meeting in Gurugram where they were trying to put everything, bring all the digital information on a single dashboard or platform. So they called us and they wanted to know that how our CCMS system will be able to provide the data for that dashboard, whether it is compatible or not. So that way, basically, we are part of the wheel. We are one of the cog in the wheel. So they are doing the commissioner is responsible for the entire corporation, for the smart city, all the projects, and we are executing basically one of the projects. So whenever there is an input or something is required from us, we provide that, and based on their inputs, like what they want us to do for their mission, we execute that. So we are in regular touch with those people. That is number one. Second question was regarding the issue of what will happen after 7 years. So I am not able to answer like it has not happened till now, because in a big way we started this street light project about 3 years back. So still about 4 years are remaining. But what we foresee is maybe after 7 years there can be many possibilities. One is the maintenance work can still be extended to ESL for further maybe for 3 more years. In some places we are already doing for 10 years, but very few places, 2 or 3 places only we are doing for 10 years. So the municipal bodies can take a call whether to extend it for 10 years, because they have done away with their maintenance staff in most of the places. So they may give it to us. That is number one. Number two, 7 years is quite a big period, and we expect huge changes in technology. Maybe like right now we are using LED lights with say 100 lumens per watt, and maybe after 7 years or 10 years we will be having, or we will be it will be possible for us to bring down the prices of LED which are giving about 200 lumens per watt, and bring down the price of those LED to affordable level. So maybe at that point of time we may again approach them with a new project or new proposal to say go for further energy efficient product which will give them further like 50% more energy saving. So these are various possibilities which may happen after once the project ends after 7 years period.
So I think I'm going to try and answer the municipality question or the smart city question first before I get to your bankability one, because I think that's kind of what we've been talking about. So I think you mentioned that there wasn't a mention of any municipality or our interaction and discussion with some of these smart cities in the presentation that I just made. So I think one of the reasons for that is that the growth of the rooftop sector so far has been primarily driven by some of these tendering and the government-based tender opportunities which have been released by central and state authorities, and these have so far not been the smart cities as much as some of the bodies like SECI and the central bodies like SECI and Indian Railways. And I think that kind of leads to the bankability question that you had also asked, in which we feel that some of these smart cities, and I think this, although the cities themselves are at the end of the day government bodies as well, and they are state government bodies, so are all the buildings that come under their or come in their region are supposed to be good off-takers as well, and at the end of the day they are government backed. But I think it is primarily because of there not being as many opportunities, one, and second, maybe a couple of bad experiences, and in terms of the due diligence and groundwork that some of these cities have done before actually coming out with these tender and bid opportunities. So one example was us working. We had participated in this is a live example, a case in point, that we had actually participated in a bid had come out from a particular smart city in Rajasthan, and we went ahead and participated and won that project. And 4 or 5 months later, that particular smart city decided that instead of allowing us to sign PPAs with the buildings in their area, they would rather have them or have those buildings assigned under a separate central tender that was going on in SECI. And we were one of the winners there as well. So I think that is kind of, talks about, that is one of the prime examples of one of the points that I had mentioned in my challenges in terms of lack of coordination between different central and state or city municipal bodies and different government bodies. So one such negative experience then makes us all the more careful in terms of our due diligence before we dive in and take another such project, because at the end of the day they are smaller projects in terms of the opportunity that they present. And if we do feel that in the documents that they have, the entire risk of finding government buildings is on us, and them not having done the due diligence in terms of getting the right, or getting all the consents and approvals in place from these different government buildings, we decide then, it makes it, I think that is why, I don't know how, the graph that you had showed I don't know how many of those smart cities have actually executed some of the solar projects for which they have been budgeting for. So I think that's one of the challenges that we are facing. That's why we, kind of tend to lean towards central, contracts and opportunities like those coming from Indian Railways or from Solar Energy Corporation, which is directly under the ministry. So it's not as if they are without their own set of challenges, because at the end of the day, even central contracts, expect us to set up projects on state government buildings on many occasions, and that is again when that challenge comes in. But from a policy point of view, if these things can be regularized, or so I think one example that I gave was of an MP tender in which we were dealing with the MP state government authorities. It wasn't a smart city tender per se, but the MP government made sure that they had listed down all the buildings, so they had categorized them under different heads, from hospitals to schools to engineering colleges to government, private buildings, and all of that. And because of all of that due diligence, I think they got one of the best, and some of the other terms and conditions, which were obviously, I mean, the overall policy and terms and conditions of that state was very lucrative, which led to them getting one of the best possible and lowest possible solar rooftop tariffs. And I think that is a win-win situation for developers like us, for the government bodies, and the final end consumers who are actually getting those solar projects set up on their roofs. So I think that's kind of to answer your question. Now I think to going into your question on bankability, I think Gujarat and Punjab were the states which really took that initiative. But I think since then these government discoms have stayed away from rooftop projects in which this, for signing PPAs directly with the developers. They would rather have, I think because of the additional cost that rooftop projects present, there is a slight bit of delta in terms of the tariff that they can get from large ground mount utility scale projects and what a rooftop project will present, and hence they would want to get into larger 500 megawatts, 1000 megawatts, 2000 megawatts kind of contracts with the developers, or maybe go through intermediary bodies like SECI or NTPC. So we would obviously prefer, high credit rating discoms if at all they do come up with these opportunities, or actually for that matter with SECI. I think one of the prime reasons why the ground mount tariffs have fallen tremendously in the last few years is one of the big a big part is being played by the risk which has been reduced because of the bankability of these PPAs with central bodies. So that is one, and I think residential segment. I think one of the other things that I kind of briefly hinted upon in my presentation was that a good starting point for any of these initiatives, especially for the rooftop segment, is going to be from the government. So once the government has kind of done, laid the policy framework, laid the regulatory framework, and we have actually seen some of the projects executed on some of these government rooftop buildings, it kind of streamlines the process for the companies, for the discoms. So all of these different entities which are involved, different stakeholders which are involved, from the government to the private solar developers, once that process is streamlined, then it's only a matter of time that developers start further penetrating into the residential space. There are a lot of small solar developers who are kind of focusing only on a particular city or a particular locality to try and set up residential rooftop projects. But I think once these initial policy regulatory driven challenges are streamlined through these large government projects, it's going to make residential segment simpler as well. And I think the residential segment will kind of come with its own set of challenges in terms of aggregation of rooftops, bankability, and the need of standardizing some of the solar project sizes and designs. And we've been talking about solar kits and all of that in the news. So I think that is going to come, and I think eventually we're going to get there. But I think there are these regulatory policy hurdles which need to be streamlined in terms of net metering, gross metering, connectivity approvals, CEIG approvals, and all of that.
I'll be very quick just to answer my questions, and then I'll open it up. I'm wary of time. So on the New Delhi project, I think it's ground mounted. It's a 40 megawatt project. I'll have to check that with you. I can check that and have that to you later. With the interesting question on the coordination between adjacent municipalities, that is a bit of a megacity conundrum, right? In the sense that Delhi is a splintered municipality, so it's a very Delhi kind of problem. I do. Sorry?
Not sure, municipalities are growing.
So let me just push back on that. If you look at a lot of the jurisdictions of the Smart Cities mission, municipality-wise, they control a lot of their quote-unquote urbanized, built-up area, right? So, for example, in the work that I do in Rajkot and Coimbatore, the municipal corporation itself has a lot of control in this quote-unquote city. I know it's a useless category, but it's one that's operationalized in practice, right? What the Smart City Mission does, interestingly, is that it brings together different schemes, right? So it's less of a scheme and its own funds itself. It actually asks cities to converge. It uses the language of convergence between different schemes and different institutions. So if you go through the Smart City proposal, you actually have the city municipal corporation getting into agreements with state utilities, getting into agreements with other organizations that are at a different level, are parastatal, but will be required to actually coordinate these very interesting problems around distribution across city boundaries. And I think that's where the Smart City Mission and the SPV in particular is a very interesting emerging governance institution that is kind of making these linkages, right? I was, in some closed-door meetings in municipalities in the city that I do field work in, and it was one of the first times where I saw the electricity department, the water department, the roads department, and the housing department sitting together and coordinating plans. So that was an interesting kind of coordination that scheme particularly brought. I won't spend more time on this. We can talk about it a bit more. Questions? Yes.
It's not a question. It's something I want to share to kind of help Gaurang's point. The idea about the MP having the data. I'll give you the background on that. In 2014, I was working for Indian Railways to basically get their first solar tender out. The issue was they wanted 100 megawatts and they give us a list of stations and we asked them, do you have actual data? And they said, oh, this is the roof size and this is the normal, and it was a very back of the envelope calculation. And we were dead against it. We said this is not enough data. But they said, let's go ahead with the tender because we have a target. And later on that turned out to be a running target because Azure and I guess Renew, they went to the stations, they figured out that the station orientation doesn't match, or the roof is not big enough, or there's a lot of shading. And then the Indian Railways would come back and say, don't worry, we have so many stations, we will give you newer stations. So this is an data inadequacy, which is a huge challenge, just not at a execution level, but just even to design a project. And after a point, after the first 100 megawatts kind of went belly up, we said that we told you, you cannot really do this. Can't give them a number of stations zone-wise and say running target, go fix it. So what happened was when the MP tender came up, we had this discussion that we need to have proper GIS roofs. Because if I don't give them enough data, the risk premium on that would be supremely high. So I think, you would agree to that. And this is a challenge. You don't give enough data and you're not clear on how you want it or what you want, and then you want a target to be fulfilled and fast. So this is a challenge that has plagued the rooftop segment. There's not enough data. Even for Indian Railways, for their own station rooftops, there was not enough data. So this is something, the team, people have to figure out how bad that can be.
Absolutely, and it's also fascinating that Google's developed this open source satellite-based tool to get, solar rooftop potential globally. So maybe these things will be disrupting, right? So not just government GIS, but other sources. Eric, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentations, and this raises my curiosity toward a question that, in a way, tries to bridge between both. But maybe it's also based on the fact that I don't know the Indian situations, and maybe it's not really relevant. I think that on the one side we had a presentation emphasizing a very ambitious program for generating more energy. On the other side, it's a kind of efficiency-oriented approach. I wanted to know if the program that emphasized the development of energy also comes along with similar approaches to efficiency at the scale of those very big buildings. You introduced, different business models like the net metering on the one side, but also gross metering, rent roof, etc. So I wanted to know to what extent the question of introducing efficiency among the owner of the roofs in their businesses, since most of them are very big businesses apparently, is relevant, and has it its own financing? Is it managed by you or by other companies? And then we come back to the issue of coordination. If you can develop on that, please.
Can we take a couple more?
Yeah, I would like to.
Yes.
Yeah, let me provoke the speakers a little, because I naturally came from testing lab, so you know what the type of questions I'm going to ask you. India, we don't have many test labs. I mean, this is perhaps the first one is for the Azure Power. The quality of the modules and the quality of the equipment that is supplied. I know they will be tested as per some IEC standards and other things. To be frank, these standards are not suitable to Indian conditions. We require a special type of standards. Do you ensure that? And how the quality or how the quality of the systems. Incidentally, let me also point out, I'm the person who inspected your first Punjab Amritsar plant from MNRE. Okay, I know how the things and systems are. Okay, so that's one question. And coming back to the ESL, I agree, an excellent job is done. But like you pointed out, the LED lumen efficiency, you only look at the intensity level of the LEDs. But nowadays, the things have changed. The concept is selling the visibility, it's not the intensity. So the visibility means it is the intensity multiplied by the eye sensitivity to that particular the wavelength, which gives you much reduced the light. Because if I use a normal white light rather than I use a particular specific white light of a combination, the required intensity will come down. But I can see very clearly. So this is the new concept of coming up, but as far as the LED lighting systems are coming out, I hope you are going to see it. 100 lumen per watt is already crossed. 150 lumens have been used now. You're right, you said it's a 200 lumen is the target. So this is what I would like to ask you about this, because I come from a test lab. I have been working for the test lab for the last 25 years. I'm from NICE. Now the number of other labs are coming. And unfortunately, there are not many labs on the quality side, certification side, on the solar. So most likely, the recent order, you must have seen this order. Of course, that only specifies the two standards. Many more standards are going to come out on that. So, and with this background, how the things are going to change. And the bankability, you said 25 years. Do you really stay for 25 years? It's modules. Are you going to give a replaceable guarantee for the modules? Or you simply add this much of a degradation is there, I will add this much of a power again. No, I would like to have a module, a replaceable guarantee. That means if a module goes down, replace the module and give a new module. That's what it is. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just going to ask a question by someone who hasn't spoken, so perfect. Can you put it in because we'll be recording this, that would be really helpful.
All right.
Thank you.
So my question is to you actually, and it takes off from where Sir left off. Couple of things. One is on ground mounted, and this is something I'm genuinely curious about, even though I'm a climate energy campaigner, and it's news to rejoice whenever there are lower and lower bids for solar tariffs. But when Azure Power bids for 2 rupees 44 paise or 2 rupees 53 paise, and you get into a contract for 25 years, and with these questions about replacing etc. not even in the picture, is it sustainable? Because right now we are having a lot of issues in the country with thermal PPAs which people have signed for 25 years, and it's not beneficial for the government right now to pay these expensive PPAs. Is there a possibility that the role can be reversed for the company, or some sort of hurdle is faced, either because that tariff is no longer beneficial in 10 years or 15 years, or because the modules go bust and there's no replaceability clause or something like that? So do you really think these low PPAs are sustainable? And the second question is, actually I'll go back to what CSE asked on residential. There's a very interesting report, even though it's dated now, from 2015, which Bridge to India and Tata did. It's called something around bees, solar bees and elephants, and it's very, very interesting because it charts like it's a roadmap for India achieving 100 gigawatts. And for me, the most important, like most interesting part of that report was that small scale rooftops, so up to 1 to even 10 kilowatt actually, really small scale, so residential essentially, and then commercial and industrial as well, so up to say 500 kilowatt. These are the ones, especially residential, has the highest potential for job generation. All right, it also has the highest level of deployment and lowest grid interruption, so it doesn't really mess with the grid in any way. And yet, most large companies, Azure, Tata included, are not looking at that market in a big way. And I understand completely your concerns about execution, that it's difficult to penetrate that market and it's difficult to implement in that market. But if you do not tap into that market, I really doubt we're going to get to the 40 gigawatt in the requisite time period or even beyond. So I'm genuinely curious to understand what would it, because unless there are big names, you're right in saying there are small developers that are entering these markets now, but people don't know these small developers. It's easier for them to trust an Azure or a Tata, right? Especially when they're buying a commodity for themselves, like a cell phone or a television. So what will it take to get big players like you to move into that market? Like, what is really stopping you?
Thanks so much. Great questions. There are a couple more on solar. Maybe start and then we can bring it to some.
So I think I'm going to start to try and address some of the questions in the order in which they were asked to me. So I think the first question was, if I got it right and if I remember it correctly among all the questions that have been asked. So the first one was on the business model that we follow for setting up some of these rooftop solar projects, and how do we kind of tie in and make sure that the rooftop owner is involved in the entire process of setting up the rooftop project and running the project. So I think one of the points that the lady here had mentioned was on the fact that the business model, which is the most dominant and the most common model right now, some people call it the RESCO model, which is the Renewable Energy Services Company model. Some people call it the OPEX model, and otherwise or the BOO model, in which we build, own, and operate the project, or the PPA model. Now, all of these are different terminologies that the industry people use to refer to the same thing, which essentially means that solar developers like ourselves, we go in, we own the project, we finance the project, we set up the project, and we own it and maintain it for its entire lifetime. And the biggest and the beauty of it and the most elegant aspect of this particular business model is that one, the entire incentive of making sure that the solar modules or the entire equipment, the entire project that is being set up is of the highest quality lies with the solar developers themselves. So I think that kind of answers Sir's question as well. I mean, if we do not make sure that we follow the right quality standards as are needed for our project to make financial sense, that project is going to fail, and it's not going to make, it's not going to be sustainable for the long time. And the only way these solar projects make money is by making sure that the generation continues to come in year after year after year, because the entire capital expenditure for this solar project is being borne by us. Even if, whether it's the commercial segment, industrial segment, or the residential segment, the roof owner, the house owner, the hotel owner, or the government building, the government does not have to pay a single penny, unless of course there is a subsidy or a different incentive scheme which the government has come out with to incentivize these projects or to lower the tariffs, which the government has actually done away with recently. The new rooftop solar tenders that are coming out starting, I think, last month or so, are all going to be without subsidies. So the entire capital expenditure, the entire expense is being borne by these solar developers. So the entire incentive of making sure that the quality is right lies with us, because unless the quality is right, we don't generate electricity. If we don't generate electricity, we don't make and get our returns back, basically. So that's one. And second is, how do we make sure that the roof owner is incentivized? Because at the end of the day, we are using somebody else's roof to set up the solar project. So if it's a government building's roof, then I think that is kind of factored into the tariff, that if the roof is given to us on a right to use basis without any additional cost, and it's the government's incentive is also there because they would want cheaper solar electricity to be coming in to their building, then that is how they give us access to their building. Otherwise, as I had mentioned, the part about the Gujarat project, the first utility scale project that we had set up, in which there is an incentive for the roof owners as well, in which we pay some kind of a roof lease or a rental to the roof owner, or in form of a green energy incentive, so that they are adequately incentivized to give access to their roof for the full term of the PPA, and also to make sure that the safekeeping of the project. So I think that is, I hope that kind of addresses some of the questions that you asked. The third one was on the residential segment, or I think the first one was on the 25-year PPA. So I think you compared solar with thermal, and I think that's not the right comparison. I think thermal is going out of the window with the way things are slowly. So I think so. You were trying to make the point that some of the thermal PPAs which were signed, say 5 or 10 years ago, as part of the different schemes and tenders that the Ministry of Power was coming out with, are not really doing as well. I think part of that is because of the increasing cost of coal, the increasing emission requirements, which is basically raising the capital cost that is required. And at the same time, the discoms are getting cheaper power from renewable sources of energy like solar and wind, for that matter. So I think that is one of the reasons why some of these projects are, not starting to make sense. Of course, I'm not thermal, or I'm not here as a thermal power expert, but I think that's what we hear and read about in the news and when we interact with other thermal power experts.
If I can push you though, the question was, what will happen after the 25 years? After the contract ends, will it have the same problem that the thermal folks are facing, right? In the sense that you'll have very degraded panels, you'll have to have upfront cost again to reinvest in it. And it's the same issue perhaps with LEDs, where bulk procurement is creating a perverse incentive to provide low quality LEDs, perhaps, right? So there are these questions around, these are great technologies you're putting in right now, but what's the longevity, of these technologies?
So I'm not sure if I would be the best person to be able to answer a technical and an engineering basis question on the longevity of some of these solar modules. But I think when we do, take up these solar projects, I think we have some kind of a warranties from the module manufacturers that we take. And other than that, I think most of the contracts that we get into with some of the off-takers, like the distribution companies of, the government distribution companies or these government bodies, most of them tend to have a contract or tend to have a condition which says that these PPAs can be extended for another additional period on a mutually agreed basis if the project is functioning, if the DISCOM does think that that power is viable. And all of these contracts have those provisions. And I don't know if you've heard in the news of late, one of our competitors in the news, in the International Solar Alliance news, they made a very strong statement saying that we would be willing to sell power at dirt cheap rates after 25 years.
Can I offer your last reflections, and then I think we'll close.
Yeah, so the question was regarding the quality and the continuous improvement in technology. So I completely agree with it, and it remains a challenge because the technology keeps on getting better each day, and with improvement in technology, obviously the expectation of people also goes on increasing. So initially in our country, at most of the places, the prime requirement is to get the place lighted. So though we were having the street lights in most of the cities, but let me say that at many places they were either not functioning, not properly maintained, or basically there was no light practically in many places. So what we have done is, as a prime work, is at least wherever we have executed the project, the uptime of our lighting is from 98%, about 98%. So it is more than 98% at most of the places, and that is what we are trying to maintain. So that first of all fulfills our prime requirement, that at least we are having light where there was no light earlier. So having done that, we provide, like wherever there is a requirement, say in case of Chandigarh there was a requirement of a particular warmness of light. So in Chandigarh we have provided that type of light. So it is the requirement based on that particular ULBs and their capacity to pay for it also. So any type of service comes with a price tag. So as you have correctly told that there are many aspects which might have to be looked into going forward. Obviously we will look into, but it will have a price tag. We will try to bring down the price to an affordable level by aggregating the demand, so that first of all there should be a demand of similar type of things from most of the places, so we can aggregate it and we can then bring down the price. That is number one. Second thing is, as you correctly told, that about 150 lumens per watt is already in the market, and not even 150, even 200 is also there in the, not in the market, but it is there, it is available. But again, the price is prohibitively high. So our job will be again to first make it affordable and then install it all over the country. So okay, this is only a thought basically, not a...
Actually, when I call it as a quality, not only with reference to the intensity, with reference to spectrum. It's more important with reference to spectrum. You take the cool white or warm white. The warm white is more closer to the eye. It's, of course, the human beings are there everywhere. It is for the human beings to visualize what's happening. So if you look at that spectrum, that's why I said the next step is the visibility.
Exactly.
So it's not the intensity that they are talking
This is
about.
fascinating. Can I ask you to, I mean, we'll just wrap up, we have lunch and this can continue this
Yeah, and that's
conversation.
just giving the ideas about that and other things.
Absolutely.
So some of these lights, LED spectrum, that one has to see color temperatures and other things, how they are really suitable to the particular type of this thing. That's more important.
So obviously, when now that people are having light in their places, so they will now go through all these like experts like you will go and educate them about what is exactly better for them, and then they will come to us and demand those things. We will aggregate those demand and provide them those things. So I think that cycle will now start.
That's a good way to end, and you know, this gives a real peek into that more of these conversations are required, actually, you know, and I hope that CPR will be a place that we can do that. Can I have a hand for thanking everyone that spoke today and for being here as well? Thank you very much. And also for... Yeah, do you want to...
Yeah, I can close it, but basically I think we are running out of time, but I can share one comment for AFD, which is so Public Development Bank, and I think all the questions we raised today, it questioned myself about what AFD is, what is the answer of AFD. And to be honest, at the beginning when Marilyn came for the workshop, we were not so comfortable with the topics, because for an institution like AFD, energy transition and sustainable urban development is two very different topics. So it's difficult to find the links between both questions. And so I think today we had some very good answer. Of course, there are many synergies about the two questions. We discussed about rooftop. We discussed about not really about housing sector, but energy efficiency in the housing sector is part of the solution. And of course, we discussed about smart cities project, which is, I think, exactly the good way to see that, how to mix energy transition and cities. And the second aspect that I wanted to say is about the solution about centralized and decentralized solution for energy transition. And I don't think that there is any reason to make an opposition between both. And for an institution like AFD, and I think it's the same, we will not have time to discuss that, but for EIB, World Bank, and KfW, the idea for us, I think, is to try to support both solutions, to have discussion with the central authorities at the ministry level to promote the central mission, energy solar mission, and at the same time to discuss with the ULB, urban local bodies, to discuss with the DISCOM to work on smart grid solution. So both central and decentralized, centralized and decentralized solution, this should work together. So that's just my comment about the discussion today. Again, thank you very much. And one last very important point. So there is this lunch at AFD office, which is just across the street. So you are all welcome for that lunch. Thank you very much. Yeah, we can go right away.
So you come out of CPR, you cross the road, and look on your right and it is there. But you can follow all of us.
Find this concept for recording.